Get the show on the road. So, good morning, Wisdom's Tribe. Welcome to yet another morning. Looking forward to a fantastic conversation with everybody this morning. I have no idea which direction it's going to take, and that's what makes it interesting. So, welcome all. And with that, I think I'll hand over to Lee to find out what we're talking about this morning. So, Lee, over to you.
Well, I was just scanning the group to find out if there was anybody new, because if there was, I was just thinking, well, not sure what you've got yourself in for, because I want to start talking about failure. We touched on it yesterday when we introduced the idea of games. And I love that conversation because it kind of got us thinking about our childhood, and it was amazing how many parallels and metaphors we could find in our own lives in terms of games. But it does, and Stella raised it yesterday when he said that games teach us how to fail. And so I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to start with this quote from Jesse Owens, and where he says, in the end, it's extra effort that separates a winner from second place. But winning takes a lot more than that too. It starts with complete command of the fundamentals. Then it takes desire, determination, discipline, and self-sacrifice. And finally, it takes a great deal of love, fairness, and respect for your fellow man. Put all these together, and even if you don't win, how can you lose? So I just want to pause there for a moment and just ask any responses to that quote.
Great, thanks, Lee. Yeah, yes, Leighton.
Hey, I haven't had my coffee yet this morning, so please forgive me for it. I think Jesse Owens is an incredible man, and it's a fundamentally motivating quote in its own right. But having not had that coffee, I believe that when we talk about failure right now, we're talking about failure way beyond our own capabilities. I think in reality, Jesse Owens' success is related to himself as an individual. And I believe the failure that we're needing to address as a society right now is a systemic failure of a sociological, economic, and political system that has come to the end of its time. And we're facing things that are bigger and beyond us. There's a clear understanding that the constitutionality of the National Disaster Act is questionable in terms of our freedoms as people and our ability to deliver. So if you're a man living in a shack in Khayelitsha compared to the sumptuous surrounds that most of us are living in, is he a failure because he can't feed himself right now? He can't feed his family? And so I think what's really important for us here is to consider failure in our own context, and to be able to deal with it in our own context. But beyond us is massive failure. It's a societal failure. And how do we own that? How do we own our contributions to that societal failure? So forgive me for that, big thoughts. Amazing conversation. Thanks, Lee.
Sure, Leighton, I think we better keep you off the coffee, because I'd hate to think what you're going to throw at us if you've had your coffee first thing in the morning. So yeah, some deep and interesting thoughts there. Great stuff. Yes, Herman.
Well, I appreciate what Leighton is saying. In as much as society has failed, so it's a duty of the society then to correct those failures. What I also wanted to just share with you, yesterday I came across an African proverb that talked about losing. You always learn a lot more when you lose than when you win. African proverb. But going back to, I think Leighton touched on a couple of very important points. And I think here is a circle of people who actually could not only start pondering more deeply about it, but also look at potential solutions. What can we do individually as well as collectively? Because ultimately, being a societal failure means that only the collective can kind of correct it. And I don't mean the collective in a communism kind of sense. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Herman. Trevor, I think you were looking to add in something there.
Yeah, I wanted to fight with Leighton, because I hear him, but I'm not agreeing, and I want him to just see through my eyes. I was thinking about this all through yesterday about failure, and I never use the word failure in describing my life. You'll never find it. So I see that I point to other people's stories because I think it's important for people to share failure. But I ask myself, why do I never share this word failure? And I think it goes back to really early days where I started picking up some insights from a guy by the name of Tom Hopkins. So I'm sure many of you will know that name. And he, for the first time, really sort of put it into my head that failure is a learning experience. And what I dropped in my vocab very early on was the word failure, and that everything that I ever did was a learning experience. So the button that I want to push of Leighton's is this word failure. I can't even talk of it in the context of society. And I'm saying, okay, we're looking at all of this around us. It's a learning experience. Now, what are we getting out of it? And now what are we going to do about it? And that's perhaps where Herman and I really come together, is how do we, or what do we gather out of this network of individuals, all the experience that we have, and what concrete suggestions, proposals, actions do we have to actually put into the marketplace? And can I give you one? Yes, all of you do that. I've got the mic. Okay, here's one. 500 billion is going out to the marketplace. When you do the calculations, they say that something like, and I didn't do the numbers, so I haven't checked, it's around 300 to 500 or 600 Rand a month, and that'll run out after a couple of months. Why not put R500 million into the hands of 1,000 individuals like ourselves and watch what they do each with that R500 million to make a difference in this country?
So I'm going to pick up the conversation, given that Trevor chose to have a fight with me before my coffee. That's rather polite of you, Trevor. I don't see what the point of fighting is all about. You can have whatever perspectives you have regarding failure, and I respect them. The conversation that I'm putting on the table is the one that you, in fact, are asking about, which is, if you want to go and get somebody to give you R500 million to go and do something with it, then what are you doing about it? Where are you at with your social entrepreneurship in helping those folks who need to help themselves? Because I believe the real opportunity for us here is in that space. So the wisdom that we have as a community and as a group, how do we apply that to the betterment of people in addition to ourselves? And it's not about running a public listed company or setting something up like that. It's about actually helping the folks who haven't had the shot that some of us have had. So I'm not looking inwardly, I'm looking outwardly and saying, how do we apply our knowledge and our wisdoms to the betterment of the society in which we live? We live in a society that is got 39% unemployment before lockdown. We live in a society that's acknowledged as having the greatest division between haves and have-nots. And that's a result of neoliberal thought and capitalism and so on. There's nothing wrong with it. We're just dealing with the results. Yes, you're quite right. The stimulus package at the end of the 2008 financial meltdown went to the banks in the US. They reckon it cost each family $10,000. They'd be better off to give each taxpayer $10,000 US. And that was the value of the saving. I think, we're not seeing a stimulus package come out. We're seeing a rescue package come out. It's around feeding people who can't feed themselves. And it's around putting health into folks who can't afford health. That's 330 million of the 500 goes into those two areas. 200 into one, I think, or 300 and 130 into the other. That's rescuing people. Because you're quite right. That's going to feed them. How does it help them do more than feed them? So, Trevor, my perspective was, I was really surprised at the question that you asked. The first time I sat in here, when you asked Skelo, how hungry are you? And I was reminded about Rassie and Sia and the conversations that were had around the World Cup. That Sia didn't worry about what boots he was going to wear. He was worrying about where the next meal was going to come from. Of course, Skelo is hungry. How many folks out there are hungry? And how do we help them? And how do we help teach them to fish in biblical terms? And I don't want to fight with you, but I've got a perspective, and it's how do we turn that energies in a way that actually benefits others.
Leighton, can I come in there, Ivan?
Sure, Nick, go for it.
So Leighton, your perspective is not wrong, and neither is Trevor's. So I think, you know, we got to differentiate here, because it's not our duty to go out there and help those people. We need to create something, and those people need to come to us. So I might be very activist in the way I'm going to explain it, but you know, 24 years has passed. What has happened? What has changed? Number one. Number two, we all in a rescue thing here. The whole world's in rescue. You know, so any package that any government is going to throw at people or the population of the country is going to be a rescue. What I think the opportunity is exactly what we're doing now, is going out there and making a difference in that what we're doing. And that's what everybody has to do. The government themselves have realized that we have a serious problem here. You know, you talk about 39% unemployment. It's more than that. You know, so that is also not a fault of ours. It's going to be very difficult for us to go out there and try and help those people. There's too many of them, number one. That's government. Government needs to do that. We need to go out there and make and create something and give opportunity to these people to come into us. You know, that's my opinion, short and sweet.
Great, thanks, Nick. Trevor, I'm going to go quickly back to you, and then I'd love to give some of the other folk a chance to comment on what's being said. So not to focus totally on Leighton and Trevor this morning, but and this is a conversation that I'm sure is going to go on for a while. So yeah, okay, Trevor, and then Leighton quickly, and then we're going to go to the others.
It's very important, and I absolutely agree with Leighton, but the one warning I want to give to Leighton is that everyone has a different context and meaning behind words that are used. So I recognize that people are looking through their own particular lenses, but keep an open mind in this discussion. So that's all I'm going to suggest to you. I think there are very concerned people in this environment, and we just have different personalities, different types, and different drivers. There are things behind people that even you don't know. Yeah.
Trevor, I respectfully take your suggestion and I ask you to look for it yourself, all right? It's a two-way street.
Absolutely, and that's the point of a discussion like this. Thank you very much. It allows other people to come on board as well.
Absolutely. And Nick's perspective is that, you know, to go out and help people, or to let them to come in to help us, I'm thinking that's an interesting conversation. I don't know how, Ivan, you want to pursue that one, or Lee, where you're at with that one, but I believe there's knowledge in this space and wisdom in this space, and it's how does that play out to the advantage of people in other spaces. Where you can't be part of the solution until you're part of the problem. And if you want to build solutions, we have to acknowledge that something's broken, and how do we help fix it? And
great. Yeah, thanks, Leighton. Yeah, I think, look, this is a discussion that's not going to end in half an hour. So I think there's a lot to discuss around this, and I think the robust discussion is good because it gives different perspectives and so on. So what I'd like to do is just pop across to Umpo, because she made a comment in the chat box, and love to hear her thoughts on it, and then we'll take some thoughts from other folk.
No, I suppose for me, I think today I'm enjoying more listening, but I'm inspired by the passion that is being exhibited, putting the points across, and I've actually been waiting for this moment where we're having these tension points, you know, and move away from the niceties. And I think most of the time we do spend a lot of time being PC and being kumbaya, when we are harboring some things that are burning inside. So let's put them out. Nice.
Great, thanks, Umpo. Steve Cotter, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
I'm not sure if I'm ready to jump in. I'm just trying to understand the different perspectives. I agree with what Umpo says. I think it's really important to be able to talk at depth in terms of what's really going on. And I appreciate, Leighton, where you've begun things this morning. Yeah, I'll take a few more moments. You can come back to me.
Thanks, Steve. Stella, I'm sure you've got some thoughts on this discussion.
Hello, everybody. I think first someone needs to give Leighton some coffee, please. And just moving from that, look, I have a totally different perception of even approaching what we are talking about now. And I appreciate that it started with us trying to speak about failure. And now I reflect on one's failure, then system failure, and I see the ripple effect, and I see, the bigger picture, as it were. But for me, to be honest with you, one of the things that we like doing with keeping things practical on a business and a personal front in terms of my work and just my life in general, I introduced something to you guys and I said, we choose not to compete, we choose to complement. And it's a real challenge for people to understand that, especially when they're in business and they are used to competing. So for me, I live in a space where I do not associate with anything that is victim. Literally, the people that work with me, the first thing that you need to do for us, you must be God to be an entrepreneur, which means in the beginning, God created. You must be able to create. Yes, there's a 5 billion that was put out. I don't like generalizing. Maybe 2 of my guys need to go for that thing, but the rest of us, we are creating. So I have a totally different kind of approach because I believe in being practical, and I believe that there's failures that I've had to face myself for the sake of learning. I really believe in failure for learning. I believe that even the Jesse quote that we're reading, Jesse had to fail a few times to learn, because for me, failure means coming to an end of a thing so that it's start to finish. That's all that it is for me. But I really appreciate the passion this morning and the debate, and I really would like to listen in more on the other side of things, because I haven't been thinking like that for a very long time. In my head, I've just been thinking about, for my businesses, I need to keep it practical. Who's doing what today? What paperwork are we sending in? Who's at what level? I really would prefer for most of my entrepreneurs to not even try and apply for funding, and because it is a survivalist kind of a thing, and I'm talking mentalities here. I'd like for their mentality to be more on what can you create? You have 24 hours. What can we create? Money, time, people. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Stella. Some nice thoughts on that one. Yes, Herman.
I wanted to come back to what Leighton said about if you want to be part of the solution, you must be part of the problem. And I believe that is, for me at least, absolutely correct. If we see South Africa as a kind of a system, a closed loop system, and if a system is malfunctioning, we have a duty to look at all at ourselves completely, because we're part of the system. If the system malfunctions, we are obligated to look at ourselves and say, what can I contribute to improve the functioning of the system? Thanks.
Thanks, Herman. It reminds me of a quote. I think it was Einstein who said, you can't solve a problem by using the same thinking that created the problem in the first place. So this is what I think this is all about. Let's see if we can change some thinking and look for different alternatives and different solutions. So Grant, I'd love to come to you on this one.
Morning all. Okay, so a bit out of my depth on this one. And some great minds here, and I'm quite happy that you guys take the flag and run out front with the big thinking. My perception on this one is I do some work down in Khayelitsha pro bono with the university for small businesses, entrepreneurs, and from my perspective, when I help someone, I found that preparing for helping in Khayelitsha the first time was wrong, because my perception of what they needed was through my lenses, until I went down there and actually found out that they wanted something, or they needed something completely different. So I go in and I say, I'm available. I'm available. You tell me what you need me to do. So I'm not going to talk to the big what's happening in society and what we're going to do with our more money than I can even count. I'm available. If you need help, I'm there to help. That's my feeling.
Great, thanks, Grant. Jasper, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
before the discussion took the road that it did, when Lee just posted the question of failure, and I agree with Trevor that in itself the word failure can have negative connections, but I was thinking of it from a perspective, and ultimately it comes back to a mindset. And the only thing one can in the end change is a mindset. But just to give my thoughts on it, when a person just, and I was triggered by Jesse Owens's quote, he probably had a good sense of his potential. And as he then practiced to fulfill his true potential, there would be many obstacles which then cause him to tweak what he was doing to get closer to that full potential. And then ultimately winning is, I've done the best I could do with my potential. And that is an empowering lesson out of failure. So that failure has motivated him. It hasn't negatized him. But then if a person hasn't received the mindset of that the power is within you, and then from that perspective start collaborating with the right people, because a system is not a homogeneous thing. If you look at a body, we're made up of the nervous system, the blood system, the whatever, and then that can broken down right down to cells. So a system works when the subcomponents of the body does its work, but it's true that when one part of your body hurts, it hurts the whole body. So it's almost difficult for me to try even think, where do you fix the problem? All I can think of, mindset. So the mindset of, if a person sees himself not in terms of his own potential, but he sees himself of life owes me, why am I living in this shack when I could have had that mansion? But he doesn't understand the processes, he will rightfully feel victimized, and that could lead to all sorts of other behavior. And Leighton is right that ultimately when we look at the needs, when I'm hungry, and I will do everything to still that hunger, and I might even behave differently than I would have behaved if my stomach was full. So these are real issues we have to struggle with. But I was just thinking in terms of the interpretation of failure. In one case, it can be a motivation. In another case, it can be a hopelessness of poor me. I can do nothing about the situation. So as long as people are in a sense of hopelessness, which brings me right down to the whole gig philosophy. When you're in struggle, you can't think straight. You think of the immediate here and now, and you tend to jump at any possible solution. And that's very much where the powers behind the scene and governments want us to be in struggle, because then they can manipulate us with the short-term fixes they offer us. But it would be an interesting forum to say, how do we start maybe discuss and debate potential issues without trying to become too emotionally involved in the issues?
Right, thanks, Jasper. Leighton, I think you were wanting to comment there.
Thanks. I was just trying to connect some thread here and trying to look at the chat room at the same time. So rather than finish off what I was banging out on the keyboard, of course there's learning involved here. And then let's start talking about the learning. What's our learning here? My sense is that local is really critical. So Skelo's power comes from the fact that he's been extremely practical and on the ground, and he's operating within the sphere that he can truly influence. And that's an amazing reality, because after all, there's not much more that can influence other than ourselves. And how do we start drawing on our collectives that we have in this group to the benefit of our local space? And it's fairly virtual because we're in a virtual space. So we've got somebody sitting in the UK and somebody sitting here and somebody sitting there. And how do we impact on a local basis? And how do we actually take the learning? Because I think what's involved here is that there isn't really a route map. So we're going to have to help people learn. The analogies are that that the last time we did this was in around the Great Depression. Spanish flu came before that. Spanish flu was a whole lot more virulent than COVID-19 is. COVID-19 is incredibly contagious, but we're living in a society with an economic cycle that's 75 years or so back to the Great Depression. There's no real route map out of this. How do we actually help the people that we care for and we relate to other than ourselves? How do we help them learn? How do we help chart our way out of this space? So I haven't answered any questions. I've just asked some more questions myself.
Great, Leighton. I think all good learning comes from good questions. You've got to start with the good questions first, and then the answers will come over time. So thank you for those questions. Ian, I'm sure you've got some thoughts on.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, in these conversations, people pick up words and then they go off on a route of that. I mean, you know, we've had words like failure. Lee's put up this thing, how do we deal with failure? Of course, there's a lot of different concepts and ideas of what failure is. Trevor says, you know, he doesn't use that in his terminology. Well, that's fine. I mean, he may have other terms, but the fact is failure can be interpreted in many different ways. You know, you run comrades and you fail to finish, or I did not finish. I wasn't able to finish. It's all semantics in terms of how we describe what failure is. But I think if you look at Jesse Owens' comment, he says it starts with a complete understanding or complete command of the fundamentals. So we need to understand what the fundamentals are and how we address them. And then he talks about, it takes a great deal of love, fairness, and respect of fellow man. I think that's something that's sadly lacking in society today, because if it was there in more abundance, I think we wouldn't have half the problems we have. So picking up these words, I think Steve used the word resignation the other day, and Trevor picks up on that. You know, so Trevor, it's not about, you know, I understand your interpretation of these things, but, you know, we all have our own understanding of what these words mean, and they have different contexts. And I think that to take a one-line stance of a particular word, I don't think is really the essence of what we're talking about. It's our interpretation of what failure is. And if it applies to society, if it applies to things that Leighton's talking about, then let's get back to what Jesse Owens says. Let's have a start with a complete command of the fundamentals. And I think from that, you can start bit by bit, step by step, looking at what we can actually do as a collective, and more importantly, as a group like this, to say, well, how are we going to make a difference? Because Leighton's correct. You know, we've got 500 billion, and you made a suggestion of what we could do with that. What do we do to actually go and get some of that money so we can actually make a difference in terms of what this conversation is all about?
Great, thanks Ian. Cecile, I'd love to hear Superwoman's thoughts on this. And those of you who don't know what I'm referring to, you need to go back to one of our YouTube videos and review Cecile's little life story. So Cecile, love to hear your thoughts on failure.
I'm just sorry, but when I heard Leighton's comment, and then I just heard the first bit of Trevor's comment, and then the stupid phone rang, so it cut off my Zoom call, and when I got back, I couldn't get the sound, so I was desperately trying to get back. But when we were talking about the failure, I was actually thinking that in my life, I've probably applied a failure like heptathlon. In heptathlon, you have 7 events. You score against a points table, and some events you are better at others. As you are in a competition, as you are in the competition, say you are busy with the long jump, and you don't do well in the long jump, not to your potential, then you have to put it behind yourself so quickly and move on to the next thing, because if you harp on the things that you failed at, then you may bomb out on the whole thing, like bomb out on life. So that was just my thing on failure before Leighton and Trevor had their discussion. So I also wonder how we as a group can make a difference in the lives of the have-nots out there. And I'm not talking about have-nots in in the broad sense, but other entrepreneurs that are trying to make it through this time and come out better on the other time, and even new entrepreneurs, bold new entrepreneurs.
Great, thanks, Cecile. We are at the bottom of the hour. There's a few people that haven't had an opportunity, so I'd just like to get across to them quickly, and then we'll wrap up. But this is definitely a conversation that I think needs to be expanded on in future sessions. So, Solomon, your thoughts on this? Solomon, are you with us?
Oh, yes, I'm here. I didn't unmute my thingy. Yeah, I think one of the most important things I feel about myself as a person is to be able to give what I have. So I'm thinking most of the time from my family point of view, if I'm able to really invest and doing well in the aspects of my family, then I've got an ability to be able to give to an outside environment. So that's actually how I think about it. Maybe it's because of the background that I come from, where I feel you've got to have a strength to be able to give to your outside environment before you are in a space where you are able to empower or help other people out there. So I think that's where I'm at with that.
Great, thanks, Solomon. Yes, Guy.
Morning all. Yeah, it's we've had definitely good, vigorous debate, and that's enjoyable because it, as long as it's in the right tone and the right context, it stretches our minds. To me, depends how one views failure. And I think in this 30 minutes every morning, I don't know how much we're going to achieve as a tribe, because it doesn't give us a sufficient time to actually collectively put our brains together and say, as a wisdom tribe, are we actually going to go and achieve something, or are we just sitting here learning people's different perceptions, etc., and applying it in our own space with the people that we come in contact with outside of this sort of forum. Here's what I think is that moving forward, we've got as a band of community of people, we've actually got to find a time in our day, and I'm really not interested in people who say they're busy being busy, because we all are. To actually say, what's important? Am I firstly important, or am I important plus who I want to go and help and who I want to give to? And it's about finding that balance in our new abnormal, to say, where do we actually find the time and energy to achieve that? And just to finish off, I was on a 3-hour session the other day with a team of people, and the 3 hours flew past, and what we achieved was amazing. The actions and the steps and the commitment by certain individuals to actually come back with some concrete plans to actually help certain situations. But look, this forum was initiated a couple of weeks back, and I believe none of us would have known where it was going to move to and in what direction. So there's a lot to take in, and Ivan and Lee, as the leaders of this, you've got a lot to think about. And I thank you for today.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Guy. Stella.
Morning, everybody. So for me, I think I also try and do on a small scale. I think if you start small, even a small difference can make a big difference in other people's lives. So I would love to share my life story with you one day as well, but just I also agree that failure, I don't see failures as failures more than, I rather see it as a life experiences. And I just want to leave you with something that a teacher told me. She actually, some of you that's maybe my age will remember when we were back in school, you had an autograph book where your teacher or your friends wrote in. And one of my teachers wrote, and that still stuck to me to this day, that success is not measured in never making a mistake, but that you never make the same mistake twice. So I think I always keep in mind, because I've also made mistakes, but we learn from our mistakes and we go forward. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Stella. Yeah, it also reminds me of another little quote that I heard, that failure is only a failure when you fail to learn from the experience. So I think that's a philosophy that I like to look at. Right, Pierre, I think you're probably last up, and then I'll go back to Lee to shut off the session for this morning.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, I think failure is a learning experience. That's what I see it. But fear also brings failure. What are we fearing? Are we fearing to fail? That's also, so it's a mindset. That's what Jasper was saying. Yes, it brings sufferings, but it also brings perseverance. It also builds our character on how do we see our failures. The thing that I see is we need to be content with our failures. It's only for a short time. It's not forever. But it's also you to climb out of it, taking that learning experience and helping others, because others is also in the same situation. So how do we collectively come together with all our graces, that's given to us, and come out and build an ark that we can, fight the storms, or to be a vessel for the masses. That's my input.
Great, thanks, Pierre. Did I see Zane hovering in the corner there? Is he with you? Does he want to add in something?
I think for this one, I'll sit this one out.
All right, Zane, thanks. But I'm sure we'll love to hear your perspective on your learnings as a young entrepreneur in some future sessions. So we look forward to that. Right, folks, I think that's just about it. I'll hand back to Lee quickly to wrap up the session, and then I think we'll call it a day for this morning.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the stimulating conversation, and the idea is actually to get us out of our comfort zones in a way, and to challenge our thinking. The new terminology, of course, is the new normal. The new normal. We don't actually know what that is, and this word failure is provocative, and it's intended to be so that it can stimulate this kind of conversation. What do we do? Everybody wonders, well, what do we do with this? Where do we go from here? It's each of our responsibilities, isn't it? It's up to us where we take this. And as a collective, maybe there's some conversations we need to have around where do we go from here? But it's evolving. It's not something that's fixed. And I think that's the beauty of this, is that both this platform, both the idea of how we started it, as well as our role in society and our impact on society, these are things that we have to creatively and collaboratively, and I love Stella's word, complement, in a complementary way, find solutions that in Leighton's words are local, that are connected with where we are, because it's the only place we can start to then ripple out into society. So I don't know that we're done with failure yet in terms of really pulling out, because it isn't just about some theoretical idea. And I think this is where I appreciate where Leighton was taking us. It's not some theoretical idea of, you know, one day when we failed, this is what we learned. That's part of it. But the reality is many people face financial, you know, and I'm not, yes, of course, we can talk about the most vulnerable people who are at the cutting edge of that the whole time. But even in this group, people are facing that fear. And how do we address it? How do we help people to overcome the fear so that we can move forward? Because the rescue package is not going to help us as much as, you know, we may try and think it's not. We all know that it's a Band-Aid over a big wound, and so we have to find what is within us that is going to enable us to risk. And if we're going to risk, and if we're going to do new things, and if we're going to go in new directions, we have to address this whole idea of failure, because that is what will hold us back. Maybe it won't work, or I've got too much to lose. So that's really where this topic was sort of happening in my head, and wondering, therefore, how do we, and we come back to this question of mindset, how do we address this mindset in a way that we're actually going to achieve what we want to? So if it's okay with you, and I've heard Stella, so I am going to vote for Stella to be our next storyteller. But Stella, maybe if we can just in a couple of days. So let's pull this conversation through, and maybe you've all had a chance to think about it a bit more, see how we can develop it. I am going to, my little thing for myself is I would like to know a little bit more about Jesse Owens. I know the basics, but I realize I don't know enough about his life story. And you think about that man and the system that he grew up in and what he had to overcome to achieve what he did. So that's just the little thought that I have in my mind going forward.
If I may, Lee, one thing he did, he shocked Hitler. Because Hitler didn't like a black man to win the 100-meter dash at the Olympics 36 in Berlin.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to salute that one, Herman. So Leighton was also doing that. So fantastic discussion again this morning, folks. Really loved the robust nature of it. I think it's the seed of something that is really going to turn into some hard practicalities for us going forward if we allow it to develop in the fashion that it started here, and actually work within the collective wisdom and knowledge and intelligence of this group. I think it can really go good places for all of us. So really enjoyed the discussion this morning. Thanks everyone. Leighton, I've put in an urgent order with Takealot for some decaf for you tomorrow morning, so we can take it from there. But fantastic day further, folks, and we see you tomorrow morning. Go well.